Set 19 CDISC Technical question and answers. Answers are highlighted in green. Question 1. Which CDISC standard ensures the standardization of raw clinical trial data for regulatory submission? A pharmaceutical company is preparing a submission to the FDA for a new oncology drug. The clinical data collected must follow a specific CDISC standards to ensure compliance with regulatory requirements. So the option A is SEND. Now SEND is for the non-clinical phase 0 trial. So this is not the right answer. ADAM is used for the analysis data sets and ready to use results. So this is not the right answer. ODM is a different concept. So this is not the right answer. So the correct answer is for doing the standardization of raw clinical trial data and maintaining it for the CDISC standards and submitting it to the regulatory submission. The correct answer is SDTM. Question 2. What is the primary role of ADAM datasets in regulatory submissions? A biostatistician is preparing datasets for statistical analysis and submission to the FDA. They need to create datasets that facilitate traceability between the source data and the final statistical analysis results. Option A. To store raw clinical data collected from CRFs. Now this is a specific database is used, right? Not ADAM. So ADAM are for ready to use standardized results where we actually do the manipulation and do the calculation and make those data sets ready to use for the analysis, right? So this is not the right answer. To define clinical trial protocol metadata, no, this is not the right answer. To standardize lab results for non-clinical studies. Now this is for the SEND, not for ADAM. Okay, so non-clinical does not come under this, it comes in SEND. So the correct answer is option C, to facilitate statistical analysis and traceability of derived results. So traceability is something like, say for example, you in the source data, the demographics you have, say for a specific patient you have age say 24 or say 30, right? So it should match in the respective analysis in the ADAM data set. So same 24 or 36, whichever the value is, it should match accordingly with the source data and the analysis results data set. Question 3. In SDTM, which domain is used to store subject demographic information? A data manager is responsible for compiling subject demographic details such as age, sex, race, and treatment group into an SDTM compliant dataset. So the answer itself is in the question. So the correct answer is A, which is DM, which is related to demographic. B is AE is adverse event, so this is not the right answer. It relates to all those adverse events. C is the exposure, which is EX, where the data collected, data consumed, how many, when the treatment was started, stopped. So all those information is there in EX. SV is a subject visits, where each visit information is captured in this specific data set, which is SV. So this is not the right answer. So the correct answer to store the demographic information is DM. Question 4. What does the CDISC defined.xml file contain in a clinical trial submission? A sponsor company is preparing electronic submission packages for regulatory authorities. The submission must include a file that describes dataset structures, variables, control terminology, and derivations. Option A says subject visit schedules. Now we are talking about the define.xml, right? What that file should include. It's not only about the visit schedules. There is much more than that. So this is not the right answer. CRF annotation is a different concept. It's a different documentation as compared to define.xml. So this is not the right answer. Summary of statistical results, well, that goes back to the clinical study report and the statistical analysis report. So this is not the right document. So this is not the right answer. So the information that goes in the define.xml is nothing but metadata that defines data sets, variables, and derivations. So what are the different types of data sets that are included? What are their respective variables and their attributes? Like say what is the text, character, numeric, and the derivations, meaning their formulations, their calculations, their algorithms, their specific minute details. So all those things, information are captured in the defined.xml file. Question 5. A lab data manager is mapping clinical lab data to SDTM. Which domain should be used? A clinical trial collects laboratory test results such as hematology and biochemistry from study participants. These data need to be mapped to an appropriate SDTM domain. So the answer is itself in the question. So here the correct answer is LB, which stands for L and B, right? VS is related to vital signs, so this is not the right answer. EX is related to the exposure, the treatment information, when the treatment was taken, start date, end date, consumer duration, all those kind of information. This is not the right answer. Concomitant medication is CM, where other medications are taken to cure in case of replacement for whatever the adverse event has occurred. So say for example, a patient has got headache or some other kind of adverse event. So for doing the treatment of curing that specific thing, you are using this concomitant medication, or specific some other medications are used before getting enrolled into the clinical trial study. So all those medications that the patient is consuming during the clinical trial, so those are all your concomitant medications. So this is not the right answer. So this domain is related to laboratory, so the correct answer is A. Question 6. Which CDISC standard is used for non-clinical, preclinical studies? A pharmaceutical company is conducting toxicology studies on animals before initiating human clinical trials. They need to submit the study data to the FDA following a CDISC standard. So option A is SDTM. Now SDTM is related to that kind of standard where you convert the raw data structure into the SDTM, right? So this is not the right answer. This is used for phase 1, 2, 3, 4 clinical trials. ADAM is your ready to use analysis data sets and derived in specific. So this is not the right answer. CDISC is maintained by a non-profit organization, and they also have a concept called as CDASH. Now CDASH is a kind of a regulatory guideline where it needs to be used as per the CD standards for the data managers and for the data management team. So whenever that team is designing a specific database, so that database has to follow certain standards. So that standards is nothing but your C dash. So this is not the right answer. So we are interested in non-clinical animal studies, right, which are preclinical before conducting into humans. So the correct answer is SEND. So SEND is that kind of standard which is used for phase 0 clinical trial studies which are used in animals. Question 7. Which of the following best describes a relationship dataset in SDTM? A study team needs to establish a link between concomitant medication and adverse events for a clinical trial submission. Now, option A says a dataset that records medical history. Now, we are here to find out the link between the concomitant medications and adverse events, right? So, here it is talking about the medical history. So, this is not the right answer. Then option C says a data set that stores exposure to study drugs. Now we are talking about CM and AE. So this is not the right answer. This is related to EX. Now a data set that contains quality control records. Now there is no data set called as quality control records, right? So this is an out of the box option. So the correct answer is a data set that defines relationships between different SDTM domains, right? So you need to have that specific data set to describe a relationship between the two data sets, that is CM and AE in SDTM. Question 8. Which of the following is an ADAM dataset structure commonly used in efficacy analysis? A statistician is analyzing primary efficacy endpoints and needs a dataset structure to handle time to event and longitudinal data. Now, option A is ADSL. Now, ADSL is a subject level dataset, which is one record per subject. So, this is not the right answer. So, this is not an efficacy kind of, it's a demographic exposure and disposition kind of data that is captured. ADLB is my laboratory data sets. So this is not the right answer. So it's a safety kind of endpoint and not an efficacy one. ADEG is your ECG kind of information, right? So this is related to again safety parameter and not related to the efficacy. So this is not the right answer. So the correct answer is ADTTE, which is time to event, right? So the correct answer is ADTT used in efficacy analysis. Question 9. How does CDASH help streamline clinical data collection? A clinical trial site is designing case report forms, CRFs, to collect patient data. They want to ensure that data collection aligns with CDISC standards and facilitates downstream processing. Option A, by defining raw clinical trial data structures. So no, this is not the right answer. So here is to streamline clinical data collection. So option C says by defining statistical programming methods. Now programming methods has nothing to do with the data collection, right? They want to ensure that data collection aligns with the STD standards and facilitates downstream programming. So here the process is designing CRFs to patient data, but here we are talking about statistical programming methods. That is different from concept from collecting data. So this is not the right answer. By ensuring compliance with regulatory procedures. Now we are focusing on collecting data in general, not to specific domain, which is laboratory, right? Not to only to this compliance. So this is not the right answer. So in general, the correct answer is by standardizing data collection at the source using CRF. So CRF can be designed in such a way that it is maintained and designed by incorporating your CDISC standards and your CDISC attributes, variables, labels, names, and all those concepts, by standardizing it so that the data is collected in a specific way and it is entered properly in the beginning of the clinical trial study. Question 10. A sponsor wants to use control terminology in SDTM datasets. Which organization maintains and publishes CDISC control terminologies? A clinical trial team is implementing CDISC standards and needs to use standard codes and terminologies for variables such as adverse events and lab tests. So now FDA is Food and Drug Administration. So this is not the right answer. MEDRA is a MEDRA dictionary that is used for doing the coding, especially for the adverse events terms that are collected in a specific clinical trial study. So this is not the right answer. WHO World Health Organization Drug Dictionary is that kind of dictionary where it is used for doing the coding for the concomitant medications across all the therapeutic area and whichever disease it is. So this is the global kind of a standards. This FDA, MEDRA and WHO. These are the global standards which can be used by various CR and pharmaceutical companies so that the standardization is maintained across all clinical trial studies that happens across all the globe, so that whenever anybody goes for reviewing that clinical trial study, it becomes very easy to review and it takes very less time for giving the approval for that specific medication. So such kind of standardization is done by the CDISC organization. Now coming back to who implements this control terminology is your National Cancer Institute's Enterprise Vocabulary Services. So the correct answer is C, and WHO is the drug dictionary maintained for coding the concomitant medication. So this is not the right answer. Please like, share and subscribe. Leave a feedback comment mentioning any topic that you want me to make a video. Looking forward for a positive response. Thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. Leave a feedback comment. Many thanks for your support and having great connection.